you might offer your staff. The workbook that I emailed to you earlier this week, that has a page dedicated to today's webinar that you can actually work through as we're going along. So let's start by thinking about what we mean by the psychology of pay. We need to turn to economics to help us understand the psychology, and something called marginal utility theory, and that considers the increase in satisfaction achieved from consuming one extra unit of a good. So let's consider we have a big chocolate bar. We break off a strip and we eat it. It's great. We feel really happy, and we get a certain level of satisfaction. And then we think, okay, we'll break off another strip and we'll eat that, and we still get some satisfaction. Break off another strip and we eat that, and now we don't feel any satisfaction. We have zero utility. And the next strip that we eat, that makes us feel ill, so we've got negative utility. Marginal utility pay works in exactly the same way. It's the change in the total satisfaction derived from money that results from 1 unit of change in the quantity of money. Works exactly the same way as that chocolate example. So what benefit, satisfaction or utility will occur by increasing income for 1 unit? And it's not always a straight line graph. The curve depends on the time in somebody's life and the priorities of that person. For an employee with a family to support, they might be risk averse, the red decreasing line. They're on the trajectory there that's shown in red. And a base pay, labelled A, gives a certain utility, that's the lower red dotted line. The increase in pay B leads to a small increase in marginal utility, that's the upper red dotted line. So let's say that the increase occurs based on commission, possible move from A to B. The employee will consider if the likely commission payment, and remember there's no guarantee of being paid a commission, if that outweighs the lost family time. If that doesn't, then the marginal utility will be low. Single person, on the other hand, might be happy to take risks. They'd be on the green trajectory, and for them the marginal utility is considered to be greater, as shown by the green dotted lines. And the marginal utility derived from income is actually different for every employee, and it will depend on the circumstances that the people find themselves in at different points in their career. So intuitively, we might think that paying someone more money will result in better performance. Well, research shows a different story. The link between compensation, motivation and performance is very complex. And in a previous webinar, we discussed how to win staff commitment and engagement, and it's not through pay. So what does research show us? Well, a professor of psychology in America, a chap called Dan Ariely, he's involved in economics, and he asked a group of volunteers to repeatedly drag a circle on a computer screen into a box, and he recorded how many times they did this in 5 minutes. The first group dragged on average 159 circles into the box, so that's group 1, and they were given $5 for every time they did this. Second group dragged 101 circles, and the third 168. Third group were not incentivized at all with pay, they were doing it as a favour. So this demonstrates that incentive pay can work to a certain extent, although the first group were actually paid 10 times more than the second group, but they were only 50% more productive. The fact that the most productive group was the one doing a favour for the researcher illustrates the supremacy of social norms over market norms, and this is referred to as social exchange. Social exchange theory, it's all about exchanging things of value. The person dragging the circle exchanges their time for money in group 1 and in group 2, and for thanks in group 3. Social exchange, it's really subtle and it's really powerful. In our second research, a group of people were given a challenge. They were each given a hammer, a box of nails and a candle, and told to fix the candle to the wall. Group 1 was timed, and group 2, they were also timed, but they were told that the fastest person to complete the task would get $20, and then the top 25% would each get $5. So group 2 were incentivized. And it actually took that incentivized group, on average, about 3.5 minutes longer to solve the problem than those in the other group. And this research has been conducted and replicated over 40 years, and it shows the same thing every time. The task involves mechanical skills, and what the research shows is that provided the task only involves mechanical skills, bonus can work as expected. But if you have performance which needs something other than just mechanical skill, then that is an issue. So once rudimentary cognitive skills are required, large rewards can actually lead to poorer performance. And if you want to learn more about this, if you look up Daniel Pink on Google, there's a lot of information there that you can go to, which will give you some more on this. And what he said was, you've got an incentive designed to sharpen thinking and accelerate creativity, but it does just the opposite. And this is what all the research shows. And what he also said was that people get something called functional fixedness. And that means that they're told that they've got to do something, and they can't see any other way than the basic way to do something. They're fixed in what they do. And it's group work that leads to innovation, and we discussed innovation and culture last week. But the functional fixedness means that somebody does something in a certain way. So how do you solve this problem? Well, you take the nails out of the box, nail the box to the wall, and stand the candle in the box. Problem solved. Group 2, who were incentivized, couldn't get that. Group 1, who were timed, got that a lot quicker. And this research is really interesting because we find a lot of people paid on commission, and they're incentivized for roles that go way beyond basic mechanical skills. And as I've said, research shows that it doesn't work. It doesn't actually give that competitive advantage that companies are seeking, not unless that marginal utility is absolutely huge and then guaranteed. So money doesn't motivate, but everyone needs enough to live on. So if it doesn't motivate, then what does? You might have heard of Maslow. In the 1940s, he developed a hierarchy of needs, and he said that everyone had to have basic needs satisfied before they can achieve the higher order of needs. Well, David McClelland took this work and developed it further, and he suggested that everybody has 3 sets of needs, and over time they're shaped and acquired by based on our experience and different things that we encounter. And if I give you a little explanation of each of these 3 needs, achievement is about the drive to excel. It's about striving to succeed and achieving things based on a given set of standards. People with high need to achieve will take calculated risks to achieve the challenging goals that they've got. They like to have regular feedback so that they know how they're achieving, and they're self-motivated and very happy to work on their own or with other high achievers. Those that need power, well, they want to control and influence other people, and they like winning arguments. They'll be competitive, but on the whole, they actually want to win. And they like getting things done, and more often than not, are really good in leadership roles. Those with a high need for affiliation want to be liked and accepted. They crave friendship and good relationships, and they tend to agree with other people to gain acceptance. And the people with a high need here tend to work better in groups. And these 3 needs are learned through culture, through age and experience, and everybody has an element of each of those to varying degrees. So how do we apply this theory? Well, as managers, we can identify the needs of others and then motivate according to their needs. For high achievers, we can give challenging but realistic projects, giving constant feedback. Motivation for them is going to come from feedback, appreciation and recognition. Money does not motivate this group. We can ensure those with a high need for affiliation are working in a team environment. We can give them feedback, but we must do that in private. We need to make sure they've got tasks and projects that are manageable for them, but not too challenging. And those with a high need for power, they're your leaders. Give them direct feedback, let them know how they're performing, and they're motivated through career development and new opportunities. So that's fine. Theory's all well and good, but how do you use it? How How do you know what needs a person has? Well, you can test to do this and help understand the person's needs. And as qualified psychometric test providers and analysts, Time works with many clients to ensure that they understand the needs of their staff. People can then be placed in roles that are best suited to their needs and the needs of the organisation. So it's really important to get that right. And needs theory is important in all aspects of people management, recruitment, selection, and development. So we said earlier that pay doesn't motivate, but that people need a sufficiency. They also need to know what pay system is implemented and that it's a fair system. So we need to consider the different types of pay system, pay structure that we could implement. And there are quite a few things that we can use, and I'll go through those now and share with you how they work. So with a spot salary, the individual spot salary, each job or person is given an individual salary. And spot rates aren't just found with low-skilled jobs, they're actually used for senior roles as well as being used in small organisations. The disadvantage of spot salaries is there's no formal structure, so there's no progression. An individual has a pay for a job, and that's actually absolutely individual to that person. There's no guarantee that people doing the same job are going to be paid equitably because everybody's getting a salary individual to them. Pay can drift over time because people will negotiate individual salaries. And this type of pay system is really difficult to defend, and it can leave organisations open to equal pay claims, and that is a big issue. The individual job range, that's similar to spot salaries, but instead of having one salary and just one rate, there's a pay range that the individual works through, so that it actually does give a little bit of pay progression, but it suffers the same issues as the individual spot salary. It's not consistent, it's not defendable. The narrow grade structure, well, that bases and puts employees together is based on skills, responsibilities, competencies, and it will normally have several grades or bands that people move through depending on their seniority. Pay spine, this tends to be used in public sector. For example, teachers is probably one that you're all aware of. The spine has a maximum and minimum salary. People move through that spine every year until they get to the top of spine. It's an automatic movement, not linked to performance, just every single year you move. The broadband structure, that's got more levels than the narrow grade structure and is normally based on seniority. And very often with the broadband structure, there's an overlap between the top of one level and the bottom of the next level. So that actually gives some headroom for people to move without the need to push them into a higher band. And job families, the last one on the pay structure here, that groups different kinds of jobs together. So a job family would include perhaps all the finance jobs or all the marketing jobs or all the sales jobs. Progression through that family occurs as people develop their career. So, for example, let's think a simple engineering job that might have 4 levels. So, level 1 technician, level 2 engineer, level 3 supervisor, level 4 a manager. And people will move through that family as their careers develop. Or they can actually hop into a different job family within the organisation by completely changing their role, and then they would move up another job family. And the interesting thing is there's no right answer, there's no wrong answer. People will actually put in place what is right for their organisations, but you need to bear in mind some of the drawbacks I've just talked about, because you need to ensure that whatever system is in place is actually robust. So how do we try and get a robust system, something that's seen as fair? Well, job evaluation is one way of doing this, and it helps us to put in place a grading system that can be seen as fair, it's robust, it's defendable. Pay isn't dished out just because a senior manager likes somebody or because somebody bangs the table and says, I want more money, and managers say, oh, okay, you can have it. Job evaluation looks at the jobs, it doesn't look at the person in the job, and it determines the worth of one job in relation to another job. And what it does is it supports the establishment of fair and equitable reward systems, and it's actually based on 4 assumptions. that jobs differ in terms of skills, responsibility, and effort. Criteria used to actually assess the jobs is assessed as good and valid by everybody in the organisation. It's seen as fair and equitable, and that the criteria used are believed by the organisation to be stable for a period of time. And then it's the job evaluation that's used to inform decisions about pay and grading. And by following a process determined in a JE scheme, new jobs can then be slotted into the organisation's structure as they come along. And there are all sorts of different schemes, some more analytical than others. And what we'll do is we'll use the jobs that I've got on this slide here to show you how some of these systems work. So job ranking's the first one, really simple. All you do is say, okay, what job's bigger, what job's smaller, and you rank them in order from the smallest to the biggest. But when you're doing this, it is simple, but you still need to think about what's the worth of the job to the organisation. So factors that you might use are things like skill, effort. So you look at physical and mental effort, people responsibility, budget responsibility, working conditions. And as I said, that this is really quite a simple, basic system. We can get a little bit more complex by using a pairwise comparison, where each job's compared with every other job in the organisation. So, for example, you'd score 0 if the job's ranked lower, 1 if it's the same, 2 if it's higher. It's difficult, time-consuming, and having done this with organisations with 70 discrete roles, when you've got a lot of jobs, it's quite hard work. But the decision on the scores will give you some credibility that actually everything is where it should be in the evaluation system. And what you're doing is you're simply saying, is this job bigger or smaller than another job? Excuse me. So, for example, is the account ledger job bigger or smaller than boat ledger controller? It's smaller, so it scores a 0. Is it bigger or smaller than a computer operator? It's the same, so it gets a 1. Is it bigger or smaller than a receptionist? It's bigger, so it scores a 2. So, and you go through every single job, weighing every one up against every other job, right through the organisation. And some jobs will come out with the same score. Some will be higher or lower than others. It will then give you a rank order for all the jobs in the organisation. This analytical factor comparison is the most robust method of job evaluation. Each job's considered based on component elements, and what I've done here is give you a very simple example where 4 factors are considered. So we're using skill, effort, responsibility, working conditions. And in reality, it will be a complex grid developed for each criteria to allow a job analyst to ask questions and accurately determine the worth of each job for each element. And in my example, I've used money rather than points so that you can see the skill attracts an amount of money for each role, and by adding up the total, you can see how the hourly rate's reached. And once you've developed your factor comparison and tested it, then it can be used to assess every job in the organisation, and it will give a score for each job against a standard set of criteria. And this actually is the start of benchmarking roles. Benchmarking, it needs to be done internally, so you do it by role and by department, and then externally to gauge the feel of the market. So how do other local firms reward staff? What are competitors paying? So benchmarking, it's a big job, but it's a really important job to understand how your roles fit into the local scenario and national scenario. And the benchmarking will then allow you to come up with an upper and a lower limit for the pay range developed for each role. And it means that the decisions that you're making are based on evidence and are more robust. And remember, it's the job we're measuring, it's not the person. It's what the role is worth to the organisation, not what the person's worth. And the job description is an important part of this evaluation process because that helps you understand what you need to do, as does talking to people who are undertaking the role. And we'll be discussing job descriptions further in our next webinar. So let's have a think now about reward and consider the benefits that we might offer to people. So first question we need to really think about is, why do we have employee benefits? What's the point? Well, the simple answer is to benefit the organisation. If the benefits aren't serving some purpose that benefits the organisation, what is the point in having them? They just actually become an unnecessary overhead. But employee benefits can increase economic and well-being security of employees, and in doing so, it'll improve recruitment, it'll improve retention and commitment. So let me give you an example. Private healthcare can mean that an employee can have keyhole surgery instead of intrusive full surgery. The recovery time is quicker, and it means that the person is going to be back at work sooner. The waiting time, if they're going private, that's going to be far shorter than NHS treatment, meaning that the person will spend less time worrying about the treatment. Overall, they're more productive. So private health cover is of benefit to the employee and of benefit to the organisation. And there are lots more that you can work through and see what benefits there are to both organisation and employee. A company called Glassdoor, they're a job search website, and they compiled a list of benefits offered by some of the UK employers. And I thought it might be interesting to take you through some of these. Google provide free food. Swinton Insurance, they give everybody a day off at Christmas for their to do their Christmas shopping. A software company in Cambridge offers 4 weeks paid sabbatical after 4 years of service. A clothing firm, they offer on-site gym and swimming pool that can be used whenever staff want to and whenever their families want to. A law firm has got free on-site dental and doctors' facilities. Rackspace, they offer an extra day's holiday when it's your birthday, and so it goes on. Body Shop, they offer up to 5 days paid volunteering so that people can take on roles in the charity sector or as a school governor or trustee in other scenarios. And you need to think about benefits because some of them are tax-free and they don't need to be reported, whilst others will need to be reported as a benefit in kind. So you have a piece of work there to understand that. But whatever's offered has to be seen as benefit to the organisation and the employee. And the starting point when you're offering benefits should be thinking about what you as an organisation want to achieve with the benefits that you're offering. And once you understand that, then you'll be able to more easily determine the best benefits to offer. Then you plan, you cost the plans, you model it before you even get to the stage of thinking about implementation. So what about the reward package? Well, it's important to reward for what's wanted in the business. We talked earlier about making sure we incentivise the right thing. If we want people to work as a team, don't give them commission-based pay because that encourages them to be selfish in order to maximise their own reward. Your reward strategy needs to be aligned to your reward policy and practices within the business, and the strategy needs to factor in your company culture, the environment in which your organisation exists, and your HR strategy. And basically, the strategy tells you what you intend to do and how you intend to reward people in the business. The key thing to remember is that whatever principles you have, they must be equitable, they must be fair, consistent, and transparent. And if you achieve that, then you're going to have a system that you can defend and is going to be robust. And think about the different kinds of reward that people have. There's intrinsic rewards, salary, pay, incentives, and benefits. They're the extrinsic reward. I think I said intrinsic, it's extrinsic. And then the intrinsic, that's things like the environment, what are the surroundings that the person's working in, what kind of leadership, what kind of development. These are all important parts of the total reward of an individual. And it's important to understand the needs of the individual, what's most important to them. And we're back to looking at the need for achievement, affiliation, and power. What's important to individuals? What's going to be valuable and beneficial to them? And that will then help you structure benefits that are going to meet the needs of the people within your organisation. And it's also important to understand that a lot of employees only think in terms of salary they receive and not the total package. And as you can see from the pie chart here, about 25% of the reward that people get is not actually salary, although people purely think about the salary. So that's something you need to get your head round as well. And if you have a look at the workbook, there's a very simple worked example there of how the figures could stack up. So let's have a look at how you develop a strategy. Well, you've got 3 issues that you need to think about, and they're listed down the left-hand side there. Once you've worked out what it is that you need to manage, then you can follow through the steps in the process here. But you need to bear in mind that some steps can't be started before you've done some other steps, which might be in a different row. So, for example, before completing job evaluation piece, you might need to do a salary and benefit benchmarking in order to help you with that bit. So it's really important to work out what you need to do in what order to move yourself forward with that process. And again, that process is in the document that you were sent before the meeting. So we've covered an awful lot of ground here in the last 20 minutes. We've considered marginal utility. We've seen that it's not consistent. We've seen that utility will depend on the individual, their commitments, whether they have a mortgage, whether they have a family to consider. We've looked at research and shown that money is not a motivator, but it can be a demotivator if there's not enough. But people are motivated by social exchange. They're motivated by other things than just pay. Talked about incentivizing the wrong thing. Remember the candle. It's important to be clear what you're measuring, particularly if you are using bonus and commission. If not, you can find yourself paying out bonus even if your organisation can't afford it, and even if you are actually rewarding the wrong thing. We need to manage the needs of our employees. So needs theory shows us that people are motivated in different ways. It's not always about money. And then we looked at methods of evaluating jobs so that we can benchmark them against other roles in the organisation and also externally. And this allows us to develop a pay system that's robust, it's transparent, it's legal, and it gives room for development. Having done that, we considered what part benefits play and how we can ensure people understand total reward that they get. And finally, reviewed the reward strategy process, highlighting the steps you need to consider. And this model, as I said, is in your workbook, so you can take that away and use that to help inform steps that you need to take. So I hope that you've found a few things to take away today, even if it's only understanding that too much chocolate can make you ill. What I'll do now is I'll hand back to John and see what questions we might have.